The house was quieter than usual that evening, the kind of silence that pressed gently against the walls like a secret waiting to be spoken. Evelyn sat alone on the worn couch in the living room, her fingers tracing the rim of an untouched glass of wine. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows that stretched across the lawn, darkening the edges of the garden where wildflowers tangled with unruly weeds. The scent of freshly mowed grass mixed faintly with the faint, lingering aroma of jasmine from the cracked-open kitchen window. It was in this quiet that Evelyn felt most acutely the emptiness in her life, the echo of laughter that once filled these rooms with the sound of her son, Matt, now at his father's for the weekend, the absence of noise like a hollow that swallowed the day whole. She glanced at the clock. It was nearly 7, the hour when the house usually buzzed with life. Matt rushing in from school, homework scattered across the table, the casual chaos of youth. But tonight, it was just her and the muted hum of the refrigerator. She sighed and leaned back, her mind drifting to the past months, the loneliness that had settled like dust, stubborn and unmoving. Since her divorce, the days had stretched long, her evenings darker and heavier with each passing week. Friends were scarce, tied up in their own lives, and the neighborhood seemed full of couples and families whose lives she felt like an outsider to now. The walls, once a shelter, now felt like barriers. Then there was Jeremy. He was Matt's best friend, 16, tall and lean with a kind of restless energy that was impossible to ignore. Jeremy had been coming over for years, a fixture at family dinners and weekend hangouts. His easy smile and careless laugh had always filled the space with warmth, but lately, Evelyn noticed something different in the way he looked at her. It was subtle, a lingering glance, a small hesitation in his voice when they spoke alone, but it unsettled and intrigued her all at once. That evening, Jeremy was supposed to come by for a study session with Matt, but Matt was away and Jeremy texted to ask if he could still come over. Evelyn had hesitated, then said yes. Now, as the doorbell rang softly, sending a pulse of nervous anticipation through her chest, Evelyn smoothed her dress, feeling suddenly self-conscious. The sound of footsteps approached, light and quick, and then Jeremy was there, smiling, a little out of breath, his backpack slung casually over one shoulder. "Hey, Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice warmer than usual. "I thought Matt was home." "Not this weekend," she replied, forcing a smile. "You wanted to study?" He nodded, stepping inside, dropping his bag near the door. "Yeah, but maybe we can just talk for a bit first?" Evelyn's heart thudded in a way that startled her, a mixture of excitement and guilt twisting together. She nodded, leading him toward the living room. As the evening wore on, their conversation drifted away from homework, becoming softer, more personal. The space between them shrank, filled with unspoken words and stolen glances. It was late when Jeremy reached out, his hand brushing hers in a way that sent a jolt through Evelyn's body. The moment stretched thin and fragile, hanging between them like a secret poised on the edge of revelation. In the quiet shadows of the house, the lonely mother and the teenage boy crossed a line that neither could take back. The night had wrapped the neighborhood in a thick velvet darkness by the time Jeremy's fingers lingered just a moment too long on Evelyn's hand. Neither of them spoke, the silence between them charged, trembling like a fragile thread stretched taut. Her breath hitched, a tremor running through her that she tried to ignore. Jeremy's eyes held something new, hesitation, curiosity, and something more dangerous, desire. Evelyn pulled her hand back as if burned, shaking her head gently but unable to erase the flush that had crept across her cheeks. "Jeremy," she whispered, voice barely audible, a mixture of warning and pleading. He looked down, embarrassed but unrepentant. "I know, Mrs. Carter. I shouldn't, but I can't help it." She bit her lip, heart pounding. She was a mother, a woman who should have been beyond such reckless feelings. Yet here she was, on the cusp of something that promised escape from the loneliness that clawed inside her every day. The years between them were vast, a canyon bridged only by a fragile thread of reckless attraction. And yet, despite every warning bell screaming in her mind, she wanted him. The audacity of his youth, his raw vulnerability, the reckless hope he embodied. It was intoxicating. Jeremy looked up at her, searching her face for permission or denial, his teenage innocence clashing with the boldness of his desire. Evelyn swallowed hard, feeling the gravity of the moment pulling her toward a precipice she knew she shouldn't cross. But sometimes loneliness is a storm that blinds you to the dangers beneath. "Stay a little longer," she said finally, voice trembling but firm, as if granting herself permission she didn't know she deserved. Jeremy's smile was shy, uncertain, but he settled beside her, and the room felt impossibly small, a fragile world suspended between right and wrong. The clock ticked on, the night deepened, and outside the windows, the quiet suburban street slept, oblivious to the fragile, forbidden connection blossoming inside. Days passed in a blur of stolen moments and whispered conversations. Evelyn found herself caught in a delicate dance between her roles: mother, woman, and the keeper of a secret that threatened to unravel everything she thought she knew about herself. The house, once a sanctuary of routine, became a stage for tension and longing, a place where time folded in on itself and the boundaries she had always depended on blurred like shadows at dusk. Jeremy was careful, respectful even, but the electricity between them was impossible to ignore. Each glance, each accidental touch carried the weight of something forbidden and exhilarating. Evelyn knew the risks: the inevitable heartbreak, the betrayal of her son's trust, the social condemnation that would follow if anyone discovered the truth. Yet when Jeremy was near, the loneliness receded, replaced by a warmth that seeped into her bones, igniting a fire she hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, as Matt was at soccer practice and the house was empty save for them, Jeremy lingered longer than usual. They sat side by side on the porch swing, the summer air thick and fragrant with honeysuckle. Jeremy's hand found hers, tentative but insistent. Evelyn's breath hitched, she glanced away, fighting the blush that threatened to rise. "Mrs. Carter," Jeremy said softly, "I don't want to hurt Matt. I don't know how to stop feeling this." Evelyn squeezed his hand gently, her heart a tumult of guilt and desire. "Neither do I," she admitted. "But we have to be careful. This can't change everything." Jeremy nodded, but the truth hung heavy between them. It already had. That night, Evelyn lay awake, the darkness pressing close as memories and fears swirled through her mind. The line they had crossed felt like a fragile thread stretched too thin, threatening to snap. Could she really keep this secret? And more terrifyingly, did she want to? The house was silent except for the soft tick of the clock, marking time that seemed to slow and speed all at once. Somewhere in the quiet, the fragile threads of trust and love began to unravel, and Evelyn knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Matt had always trusted his mother and he trusted Jeremy. They were the constants in his life. His mother, steady and strong in the way that only a single parent could be, and Jeremy, his best friend since childhood, the brother he never had. But lately something had changed. Small things, barely noticeable at first. Lingering looks, subtle silences that stretched too long, a tension in the air like the crack before a storm. It was during one of their weekend hangouts, a simple evening of video games and pizza, that Matt first felt the weight of the unspoken. Jeremy was quieter than usual, distracted, his eyes darting toward Evelyn when she came into the room. Matt laughed it off, telling himself he was imagining things, but the nagging feeling stayed. Later that night, lying awake in his room, Matt tried to push the unease aside, but the house felt different. Shadows deeper, walls closing in, secrets humming just beneath the surface. He couldn't shake the sensation that something was shifting, something he couldn't quite grasp. In the days that followed, the distance between them grew, subtle but undeniable. Evelyn seemed more distant, her smiles tinged with something unspoken, and Jeremy's visits became tinged with nervous energy. Matt caught fragments of whispered conversations, hurried glances exchanged when he entered the room, and the growing silence that settled like dust over the spaces between them. One afternoon Matt came home early from school, the sound of voices in the living room pulling him forward. The door was slightly ajar and through the crack he saw them, his mother and Jeremy, close in a way that didn't belong. The moment froze, time suspended in a breathless instant, and Matt's world cracked open. He didn't say a word, didn't confront them. Instead he backed away quietly, retreating into the shadowed safety of his room. But the truth had settled deep inside him, a secret he couldn't ignore, a fracture growing where trust had once been unshakable. That night, as Evelyn sat alone once again, the weight of what had begun pressed down heavier than ever. The fragile balance of love, loyalty, and desire was tipping, and none of them could predict where the falling pieces would land. The days after that quiet discovery felt like walking on shattered glass for Matt. Every step he took through the house was heavy with unspoken questions and impossible choices. He watched his mother closely, searching her face for answers, But Evelyn became a ghost in her own home. Distant, distracted, wrapped in layers of guilt and secrecy. The warmth he once knew flickered faintly beneath a growing chill that neither dared to acknowledge aloud. Jeremy's visits grew more strained, his easy smile replaced by nervous glances and a tension that made the air between them thick and suffocating. When Matt was around, their interactions were stiff, charged with a silent understanding that this fragile triangle was beginning to splinter. One evening, Matt stayed late at a friend's house, trying to escape the suffocating atmosphere. But when he returned, the sight that met him shattered whatever fragile peace remained. Through the cracked door of the living room, he saw them again. Evelyn and Jeremy, closer than ever, their voices low but urgent, the glow of the lamp casting shadows that danced with secrets. Matt stood frozen, heart pounding, the betrayal cutting deeper than he had expected. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a fracture that threatened to unravel everything he had believed about family, trust, and love. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words caught in his throat, tangled in the knot of pain and confusion tightening inside him. Instead, he retreated silently to his room, shutting the door against the world that no longer felt like home. Evelyn, alone again in the quiet, felt the weight of the distance between them like a physical ache. She had wanted comfort, connection, escape, but now all she saw was the devastation her choices had wrought. The loneliness that had driven her into Jeremy's arms was now a cold companion, a reminder that some lines, once crossed, leave scars that never fade. The house breathed with tension and secrets, each room holding a story of love and betrayal, and none of them knew how long the fragile silence could last before everything came crashing down.